So you want to make a Vtuber model, but has no idea how to do the character design. Well, Vtuber models are quite big projects, and it doesn't matter how pretty the art is, if the character design is bad, it will not look good. And you will spend hours and hours and hours working on a model that in the end will just not work. But fear not, because I've been working as a Vtuber model artist for the past 2 years, and I've designed and illustrated many Vtuber models. And today, I will share with you my step-by-step process to design Vtubers, from start to finish. So let's get started. Okay, but what makes a good Vtuber design? For me, a great Vtuber design is a design that tells a good story, is recognizable, and it is clear. Which means it's a design that communicates something in a very clear way, and it is very easy to recognize and remember, which is very useful when you are a Vtuber since there are a lot of us there. So standing out and being remembered are two very important things. And to have all of those things, the first thing you need is to have a Vtuber concept. A Vtuber concept is basically who is your character. We Vtubers use characters to represent ourselves in the internet, and your character can be literally anything. Mine, as an example, is basically me if I was a D&D character. Think about what is the vibe that you want to give. How do you want to be perceived? Do you want to be a cozy astronaut who actually likes gardening and cozy games? Maybe you are a cozy vampire who loves to make potions and play games. Or maybe you are a clay golem stuck on a corporate job. Your concept can be as simple or as complex as you want. The important thing is to find something that sounds interesting to you. Keep in mind that everything has already been done, especially on the internet. But you are the only you out there, so use that to your advantage. What are some of your hobbies? What do you like? What do you don't like? What is a very random fact about you that you could use in your design? And please, write it down somewhere. Write things like the name of your character, age, species, hobbies, anything. You can write as much or as little as you want, but it's very important to have it written somewhere so you can use as reference later. I'm not going to dive too deep about Vtuber concepts today, because that is quite a big topic and that's also not the focus of the video, but both Squishy and Yam Albert have great videos about Vtuber concepts, and I highly suggest you watch them before working on your character. They are not very long and they are both great. And the character we'll work on today is a Beetle barista. He's a Beetle Fae who loves to make tea and coffee. She's very cozy and friendly, but can also be very chaotic, especially when she has too much coffee or caffeinated tea. So now that we know who our character is, the next step is to gather some references. References help translate your concept into an actual character. I like to gather references for the clothes, accessories, color palette, hair, details, the vibe, anything I need. And you can gather as many or as little as you need. Just please keep them organized somewhere. I like to organize mine on PureRef, but you can use whatever thing works for you. And here are a couple of places to find good references now that Pinterest is dominated by AI slop. Sketchfab, great to find very good 3D models. Character design references, Pinterest boards. Yes, I know that's still Pinterest, but it's actually a curated library of character design references. I use this all the time, it's great. Any stock photo library, they have higher quality images, which is great, but not all of them have AI filters. You can also use movies, games, comics, or any media you like as reference, and also life around you. I take a lot of those references myself, because sometimes it's difficult to find exactly what you need. Okay, before we start sketching, there is a little extra step that makes all the difference, which is studying your references. The way I like to do it is take my whole reference board, or sections of it, put it on Clip Studio, lower the opacity, and then draw on top of that. I try to look interesting shapes, colors, color palettes, textures, and things like that. You don't need to study all of your references, but it's very good to study like the main ones. Like if your character is based on a specific fish, it could be very useful to study multiple references of that fish to understand how that fish works and also find interesting shapes to include in your design. Okay, with that done, we can finally start sketching. There are many ways to sketch characters for character design. Some artists start with silhouette, others start with values. I like to start with a very simple pose, but there is no right or wrong way of doing this, because, well, every artist has their own process. For the poses, I always try to make them express the character personality in a way, but I always try to keep them simple. Because, well, if you are focused too much on making the pose work, or like fixing the anatomy because the pose is kind of difficult to draw, you will be more focused on that than on the character design. So I try to just focus on one thing at a time. So I avoid extreme poses or poses where the character is too bent or has too much overlay. Like for Fernwitch, her pose communicates how friendly and exciting she is, but also it's a very simple pose. You can see like her whole design. There's nothing a lot covered by the bent arm, and like since the arm is the same as on the other side, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you have the time or energy, you can do multiple poses and explore your character in different scenarios, but you don't really have to. When I'm sketching, I try to explore as many ideas as I can. Even if something sounds like a bad or weird idea, I still try to sketch it, because sometimes you will not know what will work or not until you put it on paper. And once you put it on paper, you will get more and more ideas on what things to do. So don't be afraid of mixing ideas and trying weird things. For our little Beetle Barista, I wanted to draw her with very comfy clothes with a small touch of fantasy. Nothing too high fantasy. I don't want her to look like a full-on D&D character. I wanted her to look a bit more modern, but still like with an extra sprinkle of fantasy nonsense because I love it. This is the rough sketch I end up with. Now that we have some more concrete ideas, there are 3 concepts that I always try to keep in mind. The first one is big, medium and small. A very big mistake I see a lot of beginner VTuber artists doing is adding too much details everywhere. Having too much details everywhere makes a design harder to read and harder to remember. This doesn't mean you can't have a lot of details, it's more about how you use them. Your character is made out of shapes, and we can group those shapes into big, medium and small. And what shapes and how often you use them creates something called contrast. And contrast, it's what guides the eye. Imagine a blank canvas with a bunch of identical squares all over the place. There is not a single specific square that will call for more attention, because they are all the same. But now if you add one big square to anywhere of the screen, that big square will become a focal point, because it is different from all of the other squares. And the same would happen if you had like a blank canvas with a bunch of very big squares and just 1 or 2 small squares. The small squares would become the focal point. Focal points are basically where do we want people to look at. And we can use contrast to guide the eye to those focal points. And that is the same for character design. If you have a design that is made mostly out of big and medium shapes, but you also have some small shapes in some very specific areas, that way your eyes know where to look at. Detail also draws attention, so if you have a lot of details everywhere on your design, then you will not have a focal point. It is better to use those details where you want people to really look at. This is how you keep a design balanced. Usually the focal point on VTubers is the face, but you can have more than one focal point. Just don't add too many, because if everything is important, then nothing is really important. And you can apply this concept not only to the character as a whole, but also to sections of your character, like the face, the clothes, pretty much anything. Now the second concept I always keep an eye on is shape language, which is basically the idea that the shapes you use on your character also tells a story. As an example, if your character is made mostly out of squares, it will read as stable, reliable, sturdy and inflexible. If your character is made mostly out of triangles, it will read as dynamic, fast, aggressive and dangerous. And if your character is made mostly out of circles, it will read as softly, friendly, peaceful and easygoing. This is a very simplified explanation, but shape language is a great tool to tell better stories. Like, if you have a character that has a very pointy and sharp silhouette, but also some of the details inside are round and soft. This character we read as intimidating and rough on the outside, but a softie on the inside. There are many character designs that take advantage of those associations to do the complete opposite, like a very tiny and round character that is actually very fast and deadly. You can break expectations, and that also makes for great character design. In the end, it's all about the story you want to tell. For our little VTuber, I wanted her to read as friendly but a bit chaotic, so most of her shapes are rounded, but she also has some sharp corners here and there. The last concept I want you to keep in mind is silhouette. Even without any detail, you can still recognize most of these characters. This is because they have clear and iconic silhouettes. Silhouette is basically the filled outline of a character. And if you have an unclear silhouette, you will have an unclear design, and an unclear design is a design that is difficult to understand and difficult to remember. But now if you have a good silhouette, it means that it's a lot more easier for people to understand and recognize your character. This is why so many artists start a design with the silhouette. I prefer to sketch normally and just keep those ideas on the back of my mind, because then I can focus only on having ideas and then polishing them. You can do however you want, just remember to check it every once in a while if your silhouette is clear. Okay, with all of that in mind, we can finally move on to the next step, which is cleaning up the sketch. Sometimes I like to add the colors right after I do the sketch, without any cleaning, but today I will clean it first and then add the colors because it's a lot more clean and easier for me to use it as an example. But as always, test things out to find your own process. To clean the sketch, I used my usual ink and soft pencil brushes. And if you want to use the same brushes as me, I've just updated my brush pack and it is available on my Gumroad and a bunch more platforms. Okay, with the sketch clean, we can start thinking about the colors. Having a good color palette can make or break a design, so it is a very important step. The first thing I try to think about is what colors I want to use, and to decide that, I try to use color psychology, which is basically the idea that certain colors can bring certain feelings and emotions. Like blue often feel calm and relaxing, but it can also feel sad. Or like red can be the color of love and passion, but also anger and violence. Here is a little cheat sheet that I made that might help you. Okay, now you know mostly what colors do you want to use, but how do you actually use those colors? Remember that thing about big, medium and small? So it's the same thing here. If you have too many contrasting colors, your design will be hard to read. But if you have one base color, one color to make things more interesting, and one or two colors as an accent, you will have a very balanced design. This doesn't mean you can't have a very colorful palette. You don't need to limit your color palette so much, but this is a very good base to start off. Let's see Princess Celestia as an example. Yes, I am using My Little Pony as an example, because no one can stop me. Okay, so she has white, blue, green, purple, pink, yellow and orange in her color palette. That is a lot of colors, and yet her design still looks very nice. Her body is pretty much white, so white is her big color. Blue, green, purple and pink have a very similar value and saturation. They have a very low contrast with each other, so they almost read as a group of colors instead of like a lot of individual ones. And that group of colors make the medium color. The soft yellow helps guide the eyes to her face, and it's also a medium color, and the deep purple is used to accent her crown and her eyes. So purple is her small/accent color. If your colors aren't looking too good together, you can always just lower the saturation and make their values a bit closer. It won't work for everything, but it might help. You can also slightly vary the hue, value or saturation to make your colors more interesting without adding too much contrast. Keep in mind that contrast is what guides the eye, so having too much or too little of it, and your design will be harder to read. You don't need to limit your colors so much, but this is a good base to start off. For our little VTuber, I made a lot of color tests, but you don't have to make as many as I do. It's just that I really like making color tests because I like color. For her, I decided to go with some earthy tones plus green because those are very calming tones, and also green and brown reminds me of tea and coffee, which is good because she's a barista. I've also decided to add a little bit of orange in some places to make her feel a bit more energetic, and in the end I add some very small details with a brighter green. Okay, now that we have our colors, we can go to the next step, which is rendering. I would normally render and polish this design a lot more, but I really wanted to be able to finish this video. So I just added a couple of light effects, a couple of shadows, and polished things just a little bit. I really hope this video has helped you with designing your own VTuber. And if you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. And with the design done, you can now make a character sheet for your VTuber. And if you want to learn how I make character sheets, I made a video about that. Okay, that was actually a long time ago. But yeah, the video is there. And I think it's finally time for us to see the final results. I really love how her design turned out, but I have no idea if I will be able to turn her into a VTuber model, and I will probably not use her myself, so I might turn her into a VTuber adoptable or something like that. I am not sure, but I really like how she turned out. And a huge thank you to all of my patrons. Oh wait, I don't have patrons yet, but I do have a Patreon now, and the link is on the description if you want to check it out. I hope you have liked this video, and I hope to see you in another adventure. Bye!